Welcome to episode 2 of Fatal Female Friday. If you remember from my last video, for those of you who've actually watched it, I said I was supposed to be uploading 2 videos back to back, and this actually was supposed to be the second one. So, this video will be uploaded September 10th, and it was actually supposed to be uploaded September 3rd. So, literally, it was supposed to be uploaded about a week ago.
What was that? A week ago.
Fuck with us and then we tweaking, run up.
And so, the case we'll be studying today is actually a case from almost 100 years ago. About 97 years ago, to be exact. Yeah, wait. Or yeah, 90. Okay, yeah, 90. Sorry, second math. This case is actually about a lawyer named Wanda Stopa, or Stopa, depending on how you pronounce it. And she actually was an American lawyer who was the first lawyers in the state of Illinois to becoming a murderer, and how her life came to a tragic young end. So you know how I said the story takes place in Chicago? Okay, so we're gonna start back in Poland. Yeah, so Wanda Elaine Stopa was born on May 5th, 1900 in Warsaw, Poland. She was raised in a she was raised in a Polish enclave. Her mother was said to be the daughter of an aristocrat who lost their land during a Russian uprising, and her father was a renowned sculptor, apparently. And so they must have had some money, you know. And so when her and her two brothers were children, it doesn't say like whether they're younger or older brothers, just says they're brothers, so I can't exactly. I know one of them, for when they were children, they left Poland and settled into like this little Polish community in Chicago. And so people who knew Wanda personally, they said that she was smart, sweet, and she was happy, you know? And it said later on she was actually admired for being a serious person of the law. And so her parents had actually decided to go on this trip back to Warsaw, which is where they came from, in 1920. And Wanda had wanted to stay in Chicago, since she was still in law school. And so she had graduated college in June of 1921 at the top of her class, and she became the youngest woman assistant state attorney. And which, nowadays is like, okay, you see women lawyers all the time. What's the big deal? We understand the 1920s, that was a really big deal because out of her entire class that she had graduated with, at least from what we found, she was one of only 2 of the women in that class. So to graduate back then to be a lawyer as a female was a bigger deal than it is now. So yeah, so she was one of the first women in Illinois to pass the she was one of the first women in Illinois to pass the bar. And again, this is 1920s, it's not like now. So it was actually believed that women were smart enough to pursue legal studies, but they weren't like emotionally mature enough for the courtroom. Like they were worried that their emotions might get in the way of an accurate trial or whatever. And so, despite her being better than her male competitors, she struggled to find a job simply because of her gender. And so, there's this woman that it said that she met someone at the courthouse in Chicago, and she showed her like this lifestyle that was called the Bohemian Community, in hopes of like this distraction from the failure of becoming a lawyer. And so Wanda was like this very traditional woman for the time until she was introduced to the said lifestyle. And you remember, obviously, the 1920s, as I'm probably going to stress most times in this video, was a very different time than it is now. And so in this, when into the bohemian lifestyle, she met this guy who became a Russian count, who was allegedly a Russian count Ted, called Ted Glasgow. They call him Ted, but his first name I can't pronounce it, so I'm just put it up here somewhere. The reason why Ted had apparently become a count, a Russian count to be exact, it said that he was married to like another woman, but the fault, like her, not his father, but her father had given him $10,000 to like annul the marriage. Basically, in other words, like make it to like the marriage like never happened. And so obviously, I guess $10,000 was a lot of money back then. So he took the 10,000, which $10,000 doesn't sound like much now, but $10,000 back then is worth about $125,000 now. Which I think most people they'd be more willing to annul a marriage for 125,000 than 10,000, but you know. And so within a week of Wanda meeting Ted, it is said they actually went and got married at Crown Point, Indiana. And so yeah, it seemed like, this is her husband, she seemed happy and all that. And then she had met a man called Y. Kinley Smith, which I'll refer to as Kinley for the story. And so she had actually had started this affair with Kinley while married to Ted, but Kinley he was married too to his wife named Doodles. Well, her name was Guinevere, but everybody called her Doodles. Like Doodles is a nickname. That wasn't like her legal name, obviously. And so, yeah. So Wanda and Kinley are sleeping around together, even though they're both married to other people, which obviously that's a big no-no at the time period. And so Wanda is falling in love with Kinley, and so she ends up leaving Ted for Kinley in hopes that he would do the same. Like, hey, I left my spouse for you. Why can't you do the same for me? I think I should mention is that Kinley is actually almost two decades her senior. So Kinley was almost 40 and Wanda was in her 20s when this little affair was going on. So basically, Kinley was a little ad executive, married, but he hung out with the community. Like he was an ad executive and he was married. Didn't have any children that we know about, but he hung out with the community on the side. Had fell in love with him, but this community, like the Bohemian community, it had no rules. It had basically like free sex before that was even a thing now. Because it's like now free sex is like, okay, that's normal. But back then, obviously, that was taboo. That wasn't okay, before it became popular. And they drank a lot and they experimented with drugs. And there was also this major rule was like no strings attached. So in other words, like don't fall in love and live every moment like it's your last. Like live life to the fullest. Wanda's mother, which I don't know how she found out. I guess Wanda had told her, but it never really says like how her mom found out. But I want to say that Wanda told her mom because Wanda told her mom it didn't matter that he was married because marriage was literally just a scrap of paper to her. But ironically, she wanted to marry him, which means the same scrap of paper that you said didn't matter. You want that scrap of paper with him. He can't have that scrap of paper with him because I'm in love with him, but I can have that scrap of paper.
Okay.
And her persistent, I guess, request to try to get Kinley or whatever, she started sending like multiple letters to his address, which I don't even know how she found out where the dude lives. I assume they was fooling around at his place, or it never said whether, like, she. It never says exactly how she found out where she lived, but I want to say like, maybe he took her to the house and that's where she found out, or maybe I don't know. He never wrote her letters that we know of, so it's like, did she stalk the dude? Yeah, so basically she started sending letters almost every day, and there were some letters where she actually sent like multiple a day. And so obviously Keenly's wife, Genevieve, or we're gonna call her Doodles, because I can barely pronounce Genevieve. No disrespect to anybody out there called Genevieve, but Doodles is just more fun. It reminds me of that Doodle Bob character from SpongeBob, which, kind of makes the story more easier to tell. I'm sorry, but that's just how my mind is working right now. And so she was fed up because, she was like, look, I'm married to him. You just got to move on. She was fed up with receiving the love letters because it got to a point to where he stopped opening them and she started opening them up. And she would confront him with the letters. Be like, look, like, you need to stop this. He's like, I tried. She just won't stop. And so the wife came with the idea, like, look, how about you send her out to New York? Because Wanda wanted to become like a writer because remember the lawyer idea thing didn't work. So maybe she had a better chance of becoming a writer. So send her out to New York and you pay for her expenses. At least for a little, like tell her you'll meet her up there and you pay for the expenses, which you would think New York, that's kind of expensive, like, but back then, I guess it wasn't really that expensive. So you're paying the expenses, tell your meet her up there, it'll get her to shut up. So she's like, okay, finally, I got what I wanted, cool. So then, at first, you would think, okay, he ain't gonna pay the expenses. He did. He did. He paid for her to get up there. He did at first start paying her expenses, which were apparently $150 a month. Which, what expenses was he paying to where it's $150 a month, and that's all he had to pay? And so $150 a month, which apparently paid for what she needed. What would you live in New York to where 150 in New York nowadays, that would even last you a week. Some places that probably will last you a day. You can live off 150 a month? Okay. Obviously she's happy because she's like, oh, he's paying my bills. He's paying my bills. She's in love, all happy, like any of us would be. She's waiting for him. She's like, just gotta wait for the time. Just gotta wait patiently, you know. And so eventually, he he basically did what we call ghosting. You know, no contact, just disappeared. Was still in Chicago, but just disappeared. Like he stopped contacting her. He stopped writing letters. He stopped. He even pulled the financial plug. Because remember, he was paying for her expenses, right? He pulled the financial plug and stopped paying for her expenses. Yeah, so obviously she's like depressed and shit because she's like, well, I thought he loves me. He said he was gonna wait for me. I was supposed to be up here waiting for him, and now he just left me. And so she was at a party, and so it said that she was drunk and on morphine, like at the same time, which apparently is not. Which I feel like, as any of us know, drugs and alcohol often are like good together. We know that shit now, but we didn't know it back then. But for obvious reasons, you shouldn't mix the two together. And so she calls everybody's attention, gets on top of a table, allegedly, and then she announces that she's going to go back to Chicago. She's going to kill a woman and possibly even a man.
Two. Both these bitches gotta die.
That dramatic speech, she had taken off some of her jewelry as a momentum for her guests to remember her by, because apparently this was at her place that she had this party at. So it was her guest. So she started taking off her jewelry for her guests to like remember her by, because I guess she knew she wasn't coming back. And so her guests actually thought that she was putting on a performance, and they even encouraged her to go do it, like applauding and laughing and everything. Even though she was dead set on it, she was dead set serious, and nobody would find out until somebody had died. And so in the early morning hours of August 24th, 1924, Wanda arrived in Palos Park neighborhood, and she was taking a taxi driven by Ernest T. Wood to her lover's house with the goal to kill them both. Now, the Wood guy, the cab driver, he was half deaf. That's at least what sources say. And so he had stopped and asked like Harriet Scottfield, who apparently was a neighbor, like who was in the Smith's home. And Harriet had told him, I guess he had told him that it was just a wife. And so they then left. So that Harriet told this man named Henry Manning, who was the gardener for the Smiths. So he was like, hey, that they were going to have company. And Henry, he knew like the wife was home alone because Kinley was at work. Whoever these people are, they know that the wife's home alone. So for good reason, he's trying to rush back to the house like, no, it's just her. And not only that, not only is she home alone, she's sick.
I can't go out. I'm sick.
Yeah, so basically, like, Doodle, she at home sick. And so, Henry, he's trying to run to the house. And then Wanda knocked on the door. There's different sources as to what happened. There's One source saying that Wanda knocked on the door and Doodles answered it, thinking like it was a female friend that's supposed to be coming over later. That's supposed to try to come over later that day. So she answered the door because she thought it was her friend that was knocking on the door. And then you got another source that says Wanda broke through the bedroom window. Because it would explain like the Henry thing I'm going to explain in a minute. I think it was the window because it said she was shocked when Wanda was there. So I want to say the window because it will explain how Henry got in the house. So Wanda, not knowing that, I guess, didn't know that Kenley was not at home, asked, like, where's Kenley? Doodle's like, he's at work. He's at work because apparently he was at work at the time.
Hold it right there, Doodle. I brought you into this world, and now I'm gonna take you out. Any last words? I'm sorry, what was that?
It reminded of the failure of being unable to become a lawyer. Wanda pulls out this little 38 and she aims it at Doodles. And so, remember the Henry guy that I said tried to run back to the house to try to figure out what's going on? Who was coming over to the house? And Doodles was supposed to be by herself because she was sick in bed with the flu. Yeah, it is. Apparently, he came to the bedroom window, which again, that's how I think Wanda got in, was the bedroom window. He came in. It doesn't say. It never says how he came in, but he came in. He came in. He stands between Wanda and Doodles, I guess, trying to be like the peacemaker. And so, trying to convince her, like, put the gun down. It's not worth it. All that good stuff. Wanda fires, and this Henry dude, who's only 65, he drops dead. So now Wanda has officially committed a murder. So then Doodles was like, she ain't trying to die next, so she jumps up while all this is going on. She jumps out the bedroom window. The bedroom window that was next to the bed. And as she was heading out, Wanda fired 2 shots at her. So then Wanda goes out the front door. She doesn't see Doodles. I guess she's looking around like the outside perimeter of the house. She didn't see Doodles, and so she shouts out that she'll get her and that she's going to go after her husband. And so keep in mind, remember when I said the cab driver was partially deaf? He didn't hear anything that went down. He didn't hear the gunshots. He didn't hear the yelling. He ain't hear like Wanda screaming that she's gonna go kill somebody, And so Wanda had actually told him to wait there, and he did, not knowing that this passenger, just committed a murder of an innocent man who wasn't even involved in this. That he was just trying to create peace, and now he's dead. So Wanda gets back in the car. She asks them could she be taken to the Chicago train station, to which she then disappeared. So then Doodles, when she saw that Wanda had dipped, she ran to the neighbor's house and called 911, and her husband. She called the husband to warn him, but to call 911 to let them know, like, hey, what had happened. And so, like, this massive manhunt was made in Chicago to locate Wanda, because, again, this is a woman who killed. Back then, this wasn't that common, so obviously, it got crazy. And so, because the killer was a woman, the newspapers were putting out, like, special editions, and they sold, like, thousands of copies within a matter of time. Probably, like, record-breaking time, okay? And so, the men that were reading the stories, they were either thinking about being the hero and finding the ones to catch her, like being the ones to catch her and being declared a hero, or because of her beauty, they were starting to fall in love with her. Despite her literally being a murderer. But okay. And so when she arrived in Detroit, she had actually checked into the Stafford Hotel under the name of Miss Theodore Glasgow. You got sources saying she checked in under Miss Theodore Glasgow, and you got another source that says that's how she got caught, because she checked in under her maiden name. Because remember her, so obviously, like, Stopa. She checked in under Stopa. You got some sources saying that she checked in under Miss Theodore Glasgow, And you got other sources that say she checked in under her real name, and so that's how she got caught, was checking under her real name. So we're just gonna say she checked in under her real name. So Wanda was hiding in Detroit, and so she decided to write to her mother this letter with some money, a government bond, a life insurance, and some life insurance papers that made her, I mean her mother, the beneficiary if she was to suddenly die. And obviously, the life insurance would make sense in a second. So then Wanda made this poison containing water, sugar, and cyanide potassium, which, if you know anything about chemicals like I do, that makes arsenic. So basically, she made some homemade arsenic, which she then drank. And then after drinking it, she rang up the clerk to ask for, basically told her who she was, what she did, and then rung up for a doctor. So then basically it was like this race against time to where either the police were going to get to her alive and then arrest her for this murder, or was the arsenic going to succeed and then kill her so that way she could never get tried and punished for what she did. And so obviously the arsenic won and she died. It is actually said that she actually like smiled at whoever found her while taking her last breath. So in a way, I feel like she knew that by taking her own life, she knew she wouldn't be in trouble. And so her death, like her suicide, had costed like Chicago to go crazy, obviously. And so she was making it made her like this huge celebrity overnight. And so newspapers said that if it wasn't for this bohemian lifestyle, which remember that was a lifestyle where she met Kinley and Ted and all them, she wouldn't have went she wouldn't have went the path that she did. And that Wanda was literally supposed to be a lawyer. So Wanda literally was like this case of good girl gone bad. And so her wake was held in her parents' apartment at 1505 West Augusta Street on April 28th, 1924. It is said that over 10,000 people attempted to attend her funeral, which was like the next day, so April 29th, right? However, it's also said that only close friends and family were invited, which is understandable considering the situation. And so her funeral was supposed to be at a church, but because she committed suicide, the church was like, nah, you can't have a funeral here. And so neither of the Smiths nor her husband, Ted, or Theodore, whichever you want to call him, had attended this funeral, but like an administrative person had. So, okay. And it is also said that over 5,000 people waited at her burial site for up to 5 hours in the sun. And so, yeah, Wanda was buried at the Bohemian National Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois. And so, yeah, that is the story of Wanda Elaine Stopa. And so, yeah, that was the case of Wanda Elaine Stopa. Next, so that goes for episode 2. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's pretty much for Friday's video, and I will see you fatal females next Friday. Bye!